Much, Brenda. Good evening, everyone. If you don't know me, I'm Tiago, the church's youth worker and assistant pastor. And reading that passage, who can do it justice? Isn't that a beautiful passage of Scripture? Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you that there is so much hope and life and a certain future for those who belong to you as they read this passage of Scripture. We pray that you would bless us and encourage us this evening. We pray, as we have been through the book of Revelation, that you would make those who are outside of your family so excited and desirous to meet you, to have the same certain hope and future and love, and right now, that they would be able to experience being a part of your family, that they would be so desirous of that, that they would ask you forgiveness, that they would ask you to make them sons and daughters. So encourage us and include others in your family. In Jesus' name, amen. So we've been journeying through the book of Revelation, and I don't know whether, we're taking a little break, whether you remember where we've been, but if you were to kind of flick through the pages of the book of Revelation, which is what I'm going to do now, you would have remembered that back in the beginning, we started the book saying that it was a crazy, nutty book that has this genre of apocalyptic, right? So it's big images, crazy numbers that mean something that's not obvious if you're a Westerner reading it today. Like, for someone who doesn't speak the English language, it might not be obvious to them if you say it's raining cats and dogs. Okay? You can't translate that. It doesn't make sense in Portuguese. Está chovendo cachorro. Doesn't make any sense. I'm sure you agree. And yet, John has said that anyone who reads it in the congregation, because there wasn't a Bible for every person back in the day, or anyone who hears it and obey it, that's in chapter 1 verse 3, well, they're blessed because they get to enjoy God. They had to have the same hope and future and promises of God that we see in this book. And then we saw a little bit about how the vision of Christ is amazing. He is a fearful and fearsome Christ. In the rest of chapter 1, so fearsome that John falls at his feet at that vision in verse 17. And then we said, hey, chapters 2 and 3, if you've been a Christian for a while, you've heard sermons on those. So you can go to Kazakh, where they talked about them online earlier in the summer. You can listen to them there. But we're going to go straight into chapter 4 and chapter 5, the throne room of God. And there, we've talked about some of the craziness in Revelation. You have four living creatures, you have angelic beings, you have elders, and so on. And we've seen how only the Lamb of God is worthy of breaking the seals and dishing out God's judgment and rescuing people. And then we went into chapter 6, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, which was, again, nuts. And we saw that this judgment is taking place in increasing measure in the world right now. We, along the way, have admitted that, you may be a Christian who sees things slightly differently here, but I've tried to give you some reasons from the Bible why I believe what I believe as I'm reading the book of Revelation. We saw the cry of the martyrs. We saw that no one escapes God's judgment in the last few verses there. And we ended with this question, didn't we? Look at verse 17 of chapter 6. The great day of their wrath has come, and who can withstand it? Well, chapter 7 is going to answer that question. Who can withstand the wrath of God? But before we do that, let me tell you something about what I did yesterday. It was a great pleasure to speak at the men's convention in the youth stream, and there were 13, 14 teenagers in the room. It was fantastic. And at one point in the talk, I asked them, do you have a favorite vegetable? You'd be surprised to know that at least one young person had a favorite vegetable because they were a healthy young person. And I said that, when you're a child, you might not like vegetables, but when you grow more of a taste bud, a palate for them, that's kind of like your process of sanctification. You get to appreciate some more things about the spiritual life of God. You have the taste buds to feel it. And he said, broccoli. Broccoli is my favorite. I said, oh, great, fantastic. Okay, which one is it? Is it purple sprouting? Is it tender stem? Is it some other? And you just look at me blankly. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, I love food. The diversity of food in the world is something I love. I've told you once, we go on holiday only to eat. Doesn't matter what we see. It matters the restaurants that we go to. I love the diversity of foods in my life. I love the diversity of people in my life. Earlier this week, we've heard about how different tribes in Papua New Guinea look different, speak different languages, and how some of them are becoming believers, brothers and sisters in Christ, with me and you, and how that means they are going to be featuring in Revelation chapter 7. And we're going to see them in eternity, and that's fantastic. Maybe you've heard of Brazilian Indians. Maybe you haven't. We have both cowboys and Indians in Brazil. Look it up. Although, be careful, whenever you look Brazilian Indians, not all of them are dressed in their top half. I picked a tribe that would be. But the diversity, over 250 of them with individual languages in Brazil. And some of them are coming to know Jesus. And even though I'm never going to meet them in this life, I will meet them in eternity. And that excites me. That's one of the most encouraging elements of Revelation chapter 7. Just the breadth of people, the diversity of people that Jesus is wanting to rescue and to save. And so this vision should make us think of and long for a time when we get to be gathered together with all of God's family of all time. That's what you're excited about. That's what I'm excited about, especially because here in Las Vegas, we don't have that much, right? Like everyone knows me because I am the foreigner in their lives for some of them. And yet, we look forward to hear this diversity, especially diversity that praises God, will be preserved. Look at verse 9 again with me. How beautiful this verse. After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. And so these four characteristics already tell us that the God of the Bible is going to save from all the earth. Because 4 is our number for like bigness, all the earth, okay, completeness. And this is really important because if you were in John's place, in John's shoes, you might have thought, listen, I'm in Patmos. Why? Because I preach the word of God. So I'm like lonely, maybe in a cell here. Not many other Christians. There weren't many other Christians anyway when I was free. Christianity is outlawed. How is this going to go forward? And John sees this vision that the church, God's people, God's family, is so much bigger. John would have learned through this vision that the church was going to be so big it would include way more nations, tribes, and languages than he knew. How amazing. That should change. This hope should change how we see our lives as Christians right now. So we're briefly going to look at how there's this group of people called the sealed, those who are marked. And I'm going to suggest to you that the first 8 verses talk about what they look like while on earth, while they're living their lives for Jesus, and that the latter half of the chapter is them in heaven. Then. You may disagree with me. Come and talk to me afterwards, and while you see it in the Bible, let's talk about it. Let's see what we learn about them. One of the things that we learn about them, and if you have a handout or you would like one, you can probably still get some at the back there, but if you're a young person, you've got handouts to fill out. We learned that the sealed, these people who have been marked, are unmoved but not unharmed. Let's read it again, chapter 7. After this probably meaning in the sequence of things that John is seeing, so not necessarily historical, I'll talk about that. 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, so you've got this completeness, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, probably a reference to judgment, to prevent any wind from blowing on the land or on the sea or on any tree. Verse 2, then I saw another angel coming up from the east, which is normally good news, having the seal of the living God. What's he going to do? He called out in a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given power to harm the land and the sea. Do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put a seal on the foreheads of the servants of our God. So we have this picture, 4 angels holding back 4 winds, holding back God's judgments. But that seems to tell me, if we've just come from chapter 6 and there were judgments there, well then this has got to be before chapter 6. This has got to be a bit of a flashback. That's what I'm going with, and that's my reason, biblically. So this is probably not a continuation, but a different scene. So it's the order of the vision rather than in history. And he says that these this group of people, the sealed, they are protected. In this time, which is right now, when being a Christian is hard, this time of the Great Tribulation, which is what we live in right now, these people are protected. But I'm going to suggest to you that doesn't mean they don't suffer. There have been times in God's people, the history of God's people, where people were marked, where people had God's promises to hold on to, but that didn't stop suffering coming into their lives. One of those times, you remember, was the time of Passover, right? Where if you expressed your belief, your trust in the God of Israel, well, you painted your door with blood. That was you being sealed. You were marked, and the angel of death would pass over your house. Let me give you a few other instances where this happened. Little quiz time for you, okay? What's happening there? What story am I in? What piece of history from the Bible? Anybody? Yes, crossing the Red Sea. Did the people of God, did they have a promise of God there, that God would keep them? Yes. Did they feel anxious? Yes, they did. So that's interesting, isn't it? Even though they had the seal of God's promise in their lives, it was still hard. How about this one? Who's this guy? Someone is coming at him with a spear. A young man. Yes, somebody said it. Yes. David. Saul's trying to kill him. God has promised that he will be king of Israel. And despite that promise, life still got tough for him. What about this one? Young man about to be stoned in the book of Acts. Stephen. I mean, people stoned this guy to death, and yet he was one of those marked out by God who had the Holy Spirit living in him. In all of these events, God made promises to those that trusted him, and in none of these events were they free from suffering. So I'm going to suggest to you that from the rest of the Bible, when we see that these people are marked, these servants of God, those who are Christians, what God is saying is, I guarantee you're going to reach the end. You will finish the race. That's on me. I seal you, I mark you, you're mine, you belong to me. You're not going to be unharmed, but you'll be unmoved in the sense that your faith in me will not change when things are tough. I will be there with you. This is so hard because we see in the rest of the book of Revelation, even within the book, I gave you examples outside the book, but I mean, there are crazy things that we're going to talk about, like a beast coming out of the sea in chapter 13. And this beast, which probably stands for world systems that are against God, rises up and actually makes war and conquers Christians, kills Christians. In chapter 20, man, Christians are beheaded. So that's grim. And yet, they will be here. Those who have washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb arrive safe at the end of the race. So they are not unharmed, but they are unmoved. Now, if that's true, imagine, right? You're a Christian here this evening, and you know that things sometimes get tough. And the book of Revelation is telling you that if you are someone who belongs to him, you know you're going to make it. You know that as you trust in him, he is going to strengthen you so that you persevere to the end. If you knew every time you attempted something great that it's going to work out, what wouldn't you do? If you knew every time you attempted something great, it was going to work out, what wouldn't you do? You'd apply for that university, wouldn't you? If you knew you were going to get in, you'd be like, it's a doddle, let's do it. You'd go for that job. You would seize every opportunity to speak of Christ because you know that it wouldn't be lost. It wouldn't be in vain. Wouldn't you have renewed energies if you were someone who needed to care for an elderly parent, for a spouse, for a child, and you are shattered? But if you know you're going to make it through, wouldn't that refresh you? I think that's why. It's partly why this is in the scriptures. Those who are sealed are protected. It's like Jesus is saying, mate, you're going to make it through. Trust God. Trust me. Serve me. On that note, let me share just a few verses that will encourage you. Here's what this means for our lives today as well. That means that when Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 10:13, no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. Revelation chapter 7 says, yes, that's true. God will give you the energy. And he will give you this, Philippians 1:6. Be confident of this. He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Revelation 7 is saying, here's the day. People know they've made it through. Be encouraged when it's hard. Be encouraged because in Hebrews 13:5, God has said, never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. There's so much more that we could say, but that's one thing that we learn about these people. They are unmoved, but not unharmed. They belong. Remember what we learned about the seals when we were in chapter 6? That, if you seal a document like a will, for example, you melt the wax, you put it on it, roll it up, and then you put your signet ring, which is the mark, that's yours. Only you can open it again. And here, those who are sealed, they belong. They belong to God. That's awesome. That's so much better than belonging to me. I mean, if you're my car, you wouldn't like to belong to me, because do you know how many times I washed my car this year? One time. Okay, I'm not a very good owner to most of the things that I have. Not so with God. He knows what his people need. And that's why when he marks his children with a seal, just like this, they know they belong to him and they are safe in his hand. Ephesians chapter 1, verse 13. Read it with me. It's going to be on the screen. And you also were included in Christ when you heard the message of truth, the gospel of your salvation. When you believed, you were marked in him with a seal. What's the seal? The promised Holy Spirit. He lives in you if you are a believer. And so we go back to that question at the end of chapter 6. When God dishes out his judgment in the world, who can withstand it? These people. Those who know they haven't been good enough and they've come to Jesus and said, I am sorry. Forgive me for my sins. Clothe me in your righteousness. Include me in your family. Make me a son or a daughter. They belong to him. How safe. If they belong to him, they don't have to make up their identity. They just have to find their identity in the scriptures. How awesome that is. It's about much more than just escaping God's wrath. It's about escaping into his hope, into his love, into his new life. That's why I'm excited that these people are adopted into his family. Now, here's something that I learned in my adoption workshops while we were learning about the adoption process in this country, and we were kind of wanting to get approved, and now we've been approved, and now we're trying to find these kids that exist somewhere that maybe someone will say you should have these 2 kids. And one of the things that I learned was that when you reach 7 years old, if you're still in the care system, it's very likely you will be unadoptable. That you'll just be long-term in the care system until when you're 18, the state says, we have no more responsibility over you, and that's that. And one of the things that some of the books have said that's interesting is, if you're 18 plus and you're not tied legally to a family, when you graduate from something, who's going to celebrate with you? Who's going to remember your birthday every year if you don't belong? Who's going to celebrate your achievements with you if you don't belong? These people, the sealed, they belong. If you're a believer, you belong to a family so big no one can count it. We are sons and daughters. It's talking about us if you're a Christian. They are secure. In our confused and hurting world, they know they're the servants of God. That's what it says there. They know who they are. They know who their Father is. We're going to see when we get to these beasts in chapter 13, and I've hinted at that. In chapter 13, verse 14, it says that the inhabitants of the earth are deceived by all sorts of signs that world governments that don't follow God, that they kind of bend around and they're deceived. But the people of God here, they know exactly who they are. They don't have to be, like the people who are constantly trying to redesign themselves. Again, that's one of the things that I don't miss about being a teenager. The pressure that I used to feel to find what my style was, what was acceptable in my culture, what kind of friends I should have had, what I need to look like. Do I need to look goth or emo or, like an overachiever or like a bad boy, or what do I need to do? I don't have to worry about that. My identity is here. I am a son of God. The awesome thing is, as I read this, much like you would have encouraged the persecuted church back then, I'm not alone. God's family is much bigger than I ever could think, than John ever could have imagined. Is it as big as 144,000? Well, I'm going to suggest to you that it's bigger than that. Christians disagree a lot about this controversial number, okay? This is normally when the kids are tempted to switch off because it's like, well, I don't even know what this discussion is. So Christians disagree about things like that. I'm going to give you some reasons why I believe that this list here is not a literal list of ethnic Jews, okay? You can disagree with me on this and you can talk about it. So far, Revelation has used numbers symbolically. So when I come to chapter 7, I'm expecting Revelation to continue to do that. So far, when we've met 12 and 12, 12 apostles, 12 tribes, and, they've made 24, that's been symbolic in chapter 4. Now we have 12 and 12 again, but instead of a plus sign, we times it, we multiply it. It makes 144. And then you got a big number, like 1,000, and you go, this is massive. Boom. And you've got the 12 tribes, you've got the 12 apostles, you multiply that, you times it by 1,000, and you've got the people of God everywhere. Boom. Loads, big, massive symbolic list. There are other reasons that we don't have time to go into here, but I'll mention a few. If this was just about being accurate, well, who's the first boy that appears in this list? Judah, but he wasn't born first. So that's not in birth order. But who came from the tribe of Judah? The Messiah, Jesus. So he's at the top of the list. There's another curious thing in there. Where is Dan? Not this Dan, but where's the tribe of Dan? They're not in there. They should be in there. Except that I've come to appreciate that just like in the book of Judges, chapter 18, the tribe of Dan set themselves an idol, and they had been known throughout the early church history as the idolaters. And so we don't associate good things with the tribe of Dan. We don't associate good things with the tribe of Ephraim, who in the book of Hosea, it is said of Ephraim is joined to idols, leave him alone. Because this list is about another message to God's people. A message that can tell you, amongst many things, notice this. In the next order of people there, you've got Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, sons not as legitimate in the sense that not Rachel and Leah, but the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, sons of the concubines that Jacob had. And yet, they come before the legitimate sons later on. Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin. That's saying that God's people include not anyone by rank or birth order, but anyone who trusted in Jesus. They have a place here. That's why in the rest of the New Testament, you find verses like this, like Galatians chapter 6, where Paul refers to Christians as peace and mercy to all who follow this rule, to the Israel of God. That's why he can say in Romans chapter 2 that no, a person is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is circumcision of the heart by the Spirit. So that's a picture of who these sealed, these Christians are on earth now. Christians following Jesus in the world. But what about the sealed in heaven then? Let's talk about them. Have you ever been around someone who tuts when in Britain a language is spoken that is not English? Has that ever happened to you? There are sometimes happened to me where someone is so uncomfortable that in their country, some other foreigner that dresses differently is just speaking a whole other language that excludes them. I remember meeting a member from a certain political party here in this building when it was election day. And they were talking about them blooming foreigners, taking our jobs. And I appeared. And we started having a conversation. And he quickly realized I was one of the blooming foreigners. And so he said, "Do you work full-time then? You do this full-time?" That's a question I get a lot. And clearly I look like a lazy bum. I said, yes, I work full-time for the church, children, young people, schools work, you name it. We're doing it, old people, whatever, you name it. I said, I pay my taxes. I even pay an NHS surcharge, for my visa every 2.5 years, £600. And I've not been to the GP. So there we are. And he said, "Oh, well, you're one of the good ones then." Now, at that moment, my temptation is, I'm here in the foyer, everyone else is here, no one looks like me, everyone has the power to vote because they're a British citizen, I'm not. I'm surrounded. I'm utterly surrounded. And it can feel discouraging to be utterly surrounded. You feel small. You feel weak. There was only one time in this country, but you can tell I remember it well because it was the only one time in East Anglia somewhere where it was late at night and I was going home from a mission and a couple lads on bikes just cycled past. "Go back to your country!" Only happened once in Britain. But it's enough for me to remember that I felt utterly out of place and surrounded. If you're a Christian, often that's your experience of the world. But the sealed in heaven, in the future, here's what they show you. Your family. You might look small in your school. You might look small in your neighborhood. You might be the only Christian in your cul-de-sac or whatever. But look at this family here. No one, verse 9, can number it. It is so enormous what Jesus has done that you might look small now, but remember, you are not. Your family is not small at all. No one could count it. From every nation, tribe, people, language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. What an encouragement for anyone who feels small as a Christian. For little imprisoned John and the persecuted Christians after him to know that the gospel will spread way beyond his prison cell. As we almost come to a close, let me give you just a few reasons why I love this verse. Okay? One of the reasons why I love this verse is because I love diversity. If you're taking notes, that's what's in there. I told you I love the foods of the world, the different cultures that they represent. I love finding out how people from different cultures, when they heard the good news about how they were sinners, how Jesus died for them, how Jesus rose again, what is it that jumped out at them straight away? Because different cultures, they'll sometimes say different things. I remember talking to a missionary who was in a Muslim country, and the thing that just kind of popped out to them was that Jesus touched a woman. Just like that. And I was like, wow, I never would have thought about that. Tell me more about how you came to faith. I love that diversity, and I will see it. And us loving different cultures, I'm going to suggest to you, is a sign that we actually get the gospel. We understand it because we understand that this good news about Jesus' forgiveness is about every nation. And we also get that the good of this diversity is going to be carried over into eternity. Why do I say that? Because we're here on the other side of eternity, and yet John can still look at these people and go, oh, this person is from a different tribe to this person. They speak a different language. They're from a different nation. So there's something good about diversity. God wants to preserve it in eternity. I love diversity. Another reason why I love these verses is I love equality. They can only stand in this throng of people because they believed the Lamb and their sins were forgiven. Nothing they could have ever done. They couldn't have never been impressive. They could have never spoken eloquently enough. And so, before the foot of the cross, everyone is equal. Before the empty tomb, everyone is equal as Jesus gives them new life. I love their garb. I love their clothes. The prospect of receiving white robes that symbolize purity, palm branches that symbolize victory. The prospect for me that because I believed in Jesus, verse 14, when I get there, I will have washed my robes in the blood of the Lamb. I will be finally, fully sanctified, pure before God's presence. I'm never going to want anything that's against God. I'm never going to want anything that's going to make me enjoy God less. That's why we go to things like concerts. We want to share the same joy with other people. Earlier this week, I went to a fantastic ballet. Okay, I can recommend it to you. It's called Merlin by the Northern Ballet. Some of you, in your mind, you're either rolling your eyes or tutting because you don't share this love with me. You just don't get it. You're like, why would you pay to do this, right? Here, this multitude, everyone gets it. Not about ballet, but about this new family. Everyone gets it. Why Jesus is awesome. Not everybody does in your school. Not every one of your friends do. Not every one of your neighbors. Here, we're going to be in a place where everyone gets it. And we love it together. So I love the diversity. I love the equality. I love their clothes. But here's a warning. A temptation that we have is if you think, and I think, the British are best, these verses don't make sense. Because if the British are best, well, if my culture is the best, I don't look forward to this, do I? Because I don't think that anybody else has got anything to offer. Here's another warning. If I only think that proper Christians are Christians that believe exactly as I do, well, I'm not looking forward to spending eternity with other Christians that instead of worshiping God like this, they want to worship God like this or like this. I'm like, I don't want to be anywhere near these people. But no, if I appreciate that anyone who loves Jesus and is forgiven by him is my brother or sister, I look forward to this. And finally, I love their future. Just really quickly, look at verses 15 to 17. Just a few things. I was one of the most cuddly children in the universe. I loved hugs and kisses. And one of the things that I loved the most was no matter what kind of a day I've had, when I got home and I hugged Mum, all over. She instantly, okay? When she sheltered me with her arms, I'm like, yep, all forgotten. Whatever's happened, okay? I'm here, I'm safe. Therefore, they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple, and he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. You don't need a temple anymore. The temple signifies God's presence, and now you're in his presence forever, sheltered, safe. Every time we are hugged or comforted by another human being, we mirror that longing that we have that's only going to be fulfilled when we are finally sheltered in eternity. Never again will they hunger. All the effects of the riders, famine, war, sickness, undone. Verse 17, for the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. He would lead them to springs of living water. God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. This shepherd only makes sense if when you read a passage like John chapter 10 and Jesus says, my sheep hear my voice, you only look forward to this if you're like, yeah, Jesus' voice is sweet. Jesus' voice when he says to me, I love you, you are safe, you're part of my family, you're a sinner, you need forgiveness. That's sweet to my ears. If that makes sense to you, if that's you, if you know you're a sinner, you know he died in your place, you know you're part of a new family, you know his word is true, then you long for this, and you will get it. He shepherds us into eternity when life is confusing. He guides us to refreshment by living waters because, do you know what? Trials are hard. He wipes our tears because this life produces a lot of tears. Would you not want to be one of the sealed on earth and in heaven? Would you not want to be one of those who are unmoved, adopted, belonging, secure in their identity? I finish by telling you this. This is why we're doing Revelation chapter 7, because of Isaiah 35. Here's what it says. Isaiah 35 says to me that I should encourage you with these verses like this. Strengthen the feeble knees. Steady the knees that give way. How? With these truths. Your family is bigger. You are adopted. You're part of his family. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong and do not fear. God's going to carry you through. Your God will come. He will come with vengeance. He is just. With divine retribution, he will come to save you. Let me pray and thank God that any of his children are safe, they are loved, and that any of you who want to belong to his family, you can. Let's pray together. And they cried out in a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. Thank you, Lord Jesus, that salvation belongs to you. No one else can rescue us. No one else can fix our sinful hearts. No one else can give us this certain hope beyond death that looks so good like this, being with you forever. We just pray, Lord Jesus, that you would work in our hearts so that when the going gets tough, when we feel like we are small and weak as Christians, we would remember our family is so much bigger. You've rescued so many people. Help us to be brave and courageous in you because this day is coming and we look forward to it. Amen.